Hey, hello friends, welcome to this new Flutter tutorial, and in this we'll be learning about how to create this sort of wallpaper app inside of Flutter. We'll be saving the images inside of Firebase Storage, so you'll need to know how to integrate Firebase into your Flutter project. If you don't know how to do that, you can check out my previous tutorial that covers all the concepts clearly. I'll just link that in the description, and you can see when I run this app again using hot restart, so you can see that when the images are not loaded, it just shows no data, and when I scroll through the images, as the images are loaded, they're just asynchronously loaded into the grid items. So first we'll learn how to create this sort of grid, and then we'll learn how to use Firebase Storage to add images to those grid items. So this is quite a simple tutorial, but it'll just take some time to get used to, so let's get started. Okay, so now I am in a new Flutter project that is given to you when you create a new project itself. So I have just added the usual material.dart file and just a simple white main function to create the material app. And the home screen is the image screen that we will create now in this tutorial to show the images. And other than this, I have already added Firebase to this Flutter project. That is, and you need to add this Firebase _ storage dependency in here, because all the images that we'll be using here are there in the storage of Firebase project linked to this project, linked to this Flutter project. Okay, so in the storage section of the Firebase project, I have this photos folder, and in the photos I have added images with the names accordingly, because I'm not creating the database that holds the download URLs to these images. So image _1 to 12 I have added in the storage, and we'll be using this index number to load them into the list into the grid view. Okay, so this is the Firebase project with the storage option enabled. And one more thing to keep in mind, as we're not integrating the Firebase authentication, so you must check the rules here. If you're implementing the same project, you need to allow the read and write operations to true. Okay, so anyone with the database integrated, or with the database link, can access the images and write to the images. So this is not good for production purposes, but it's good for testing and just tutorial purposes only. So okay, so let's move back to the project itself. Okay, so I've added Firebase _ storage package that is being used for loading the images from the Firebase project. Okay, so make sure to click the packages upgrade, and once the upgrade is done, we move back to the main.dart file and we import Firebase Storage. And yes, we have now successfully integrated Firebase Storage into the project. Okay, so let's get started with the image loading part and the grid view. So we need to create a new image screen. So let this be a stateless widget, because we don't really need to maintain the state, okay, of the image screen itself. We'll maintain the state of the items themselves. So we'll just create a new class, image screen. So instead of typing everything out, what I will do is stateless. Okay, so these shortcuts are really useful inside of Android Studio. So I'll just type images screen, and yeah, we're good to go. So inside of the images screen, what I will do is, instead of the container, I'll just add a simple scaffold, and in the scaffold I'll add an app bar, the usual process of adding the app bar with a title, and the title needs to be another widget, so it can be a text, images app, images grid, and other than that, I'll just add a body. Inside the body, I'll add a new container for now. So the container will have a child, and let's just add center to it for now. So for creating a grid view, I'll just create another function inside of images screen. So I'll just name this make images grid. I also can add that directly into the code, but I just like to create functions for these small things if I need to alter anything in the future, so I don't have to mess up the hierarchy here. I'll just have to change the code in the function. So it will just return, I need to make it return a widget, and the function will return a grid view.builder with a grid delegate and an item builder. Okay, so what grid delegate takes is a silver, it's kind of a big name, so delegate, let's type delegate. Okay, so we're gonna choose fixed count, silver grid delegate with fixed cross-access count. So what this means is it's gonna keep the number of columns fixed. So for this application, we don't want to change the number of columns based on any situation, so we just use this, and inside of its argument we'll pass cross-access count to be 2 because we want 2 columns to be shown in the grid. So in the item builder is kind of same for every widget that you use it in, so it just takes a context and an index. Okay, so the item builder, we need to put a colon here and a comma here. Okay, so there are 2 properties. One is the grid delegate, which takes a silver grid delegate with fixed cross-access count, which means that we're passing a constant for the number of columns in the grid cross-access count. Okay, so the item builder takes a context and an index, and the item builder will further build the items. It will return a grid tile that takes a child, and let's keep the child empty for now. Okay, let's just put low. Okay, let's just keep the grid tile empty for now. So if you do not know what cross-access count is, in case of your application, this sort of vertical line is the main axis and this is the cross-axis. Okay, so basically what this is asking is the cross-axis count, the horizontal count, so because the columns are placed in a horizontal manner, so it's asking for the horizontal count, that is the cross-axis count, to be 2. Okay, so for creating a grid tile, basically we want each item of the grid to check the state of itself. Okay, because there is no way in the list view to check if the item is loaded or not, because each item in the list is going to be an image and we're going to load that image from the Firebase server. So each item is going to take a different amount of time to get loaded. So we want to check if the item is loaded, then we want to display an image, and if the item is not loaded, we want to display just a simple text that says no data. So for that purposes, we want to create a new widget. We'll create it down here. We'll call this image item. Okay, image grid item for just being more specific. We'll just extend it to be a stateful widget. So for making a stateful widget also, we can use just a shortcut, stateful, STFUL, and we'll call this image grid item. Okay, so it just creates the boilerplate code for us. So okay, so instead of the container here, we will return what we will do is, in the item builder, I'll just delete the grid tile from here. There is no use. I'll just add a new image grid item, and we'll pass in the index, because we'll need the index to load the image. As you already know that in the photos app, folder in the storage, I have named the images according to their index, 1, 10, 11, and so on. So in the grid view.builder, I'll put a property known as item count. I'll make this 12 because there are going to be 12 items in the list, and in the index I'll just pass this index in the constructor. I'll create a new constructor in image grid item, and I'll pass int index here and create a new property called int index. This is a private field as it has that underscore prior to it. So I'll just call this dot int index is equal to index. Okay, so first things first is we want a reference to the Firebase storage to get the image. So as we have already imported Firebase storage here, we'll create a new storage reference. If you come from an Android background and you have you're already familiar with the Firebase functionality, so you know what the storage reference is. It's basically a reference to the path that we're storing the images in. So the Firebase storage, we call this photos reference, is equal to Firebase storage dot instance dot reference dot child. So I'll just pass photos here, because after getting the reference to the Firebase storage, we want to get to the photos folder, which will load here. Yeah, we want to get to this folder, photos. So I have passed the child of photos. So basically this statement, this Firebase photos reference, is pointing to this photos folder. Okay, so next step, we want to look into the photos folder to get the image. So we'll just create a new method inside of the state. Okay, so I'll just create a new method here. We'll just call that get image. Okay, so inside the get image, what we'll do is we'll create photos reference. We do not want to declare the variable here. We want to declare this in the photos state, image grid item state. Okay, so we'll take photos reference dot child. We'll pass an image underscore $, and we'll pass in the index. Widget dot index dot jpg. So if you're confused with this, so basically we're searching for a child with the name image underscore, then the index that we're searching for, then the .jpg, because that is exactly the format and the images are placed in the folder of the photos. If you're already if you're using some other kind of mechanism to store the images in the to store the image links in the database and then get the images, that's up to you. It's completely fine. You can choose different ways depending upon the application that you're building, but for the tutorial purposes, I'm just keeping this simple. So we'll call image underscore the index number dot jpg, basically what we're doing here. So then I'll just call dot get data, and we have to pass in the maximum size. So if I look into the images that are here, the size varies a lot. It's from 93 KB to approximately 5 MBs here. So I'll just create a new variable. I'll just call this integer max size, and I'll just name this I'll just keep this 4 into 1024 into 1024. Okay, no, but 4 megabytes is quite less for our use case, so I'll just keep this to 7. So I'll just pass that max size here, max size, and then I'll pass then. So when I just type then, you can see that there is this data type, the typed data of uint8 list. So basically this is the form of data that the Firestore returns us to get the image. Okay, so I'll just pass in data, and I also would like to create a catch error function in case we get an error. So I'll just pass error, and in case of error we'll just return nothing. Okay, so basically what we're doing right now is we're creating a photos reference, a storage reference to point to the photos folder, and then we're taking that photos folder to get the image with the name image underscore the index and .jpg, and we set the maximum size and we try to retrieve the image. If we get the image, we want to store that in a way. Okay, so basically what I will do is I'll just create a new variable of type uint8 list, and I'll just call that image file. So you need to import library typed data to use it properly. Okay, you'll need to import this package, dart typed data package, to use this data type. So what I will do next is I'll just add that data to this image file. So what I will do is I'll say this dot set state, and I create a function, and I'll assign the image file to that data. Okay, so basically when the data is loaded, it's going to show the image file here, and in the builder function we want to return a grid tile with a child. So we need to determine if the image file is null or not. If the image file is null, we want to return a text view, or else we'll return the image. So for that, I'll just create another function. I'll just create decide grid tile view widget. I'm just really bad at naming such stuff, so I'll just return a widget here. And if the image file is a null, then we'll return text that says no data. Sorry, no data, and I'll just wrap that with a center widget. Else we'll return image dot memory. So image memory, as you can see, it takes uint8 list that is being returned by the Firebase. So we can directly pass image file here. Okay, and we'll also just fit. We want to fit the image inside the view. So I'll use fit. I'll add the fit property, and I will just pass in box fit dot cover. So it'll cover the whole area of the grid tile, basically. So yeah, this is fine, and we want to return them, obviously. So my bad. Return. So in the child here, we'll just call decide create view child widget, and yeah, this is fine. So basically at this point we can add this image grid item here, and we are passing the index, so this should work fine for just the first prototype of the application. And now if I run this, okay, so as the app runs, we see that there is nothing in the application. This is basically our bad. We forgot to just make the image grid here. Instead of center, we want to make images grid. And from that, I remember that we also need to call this getImage method, because without calling the getImage method, there's no way to get the image from Firebase, sorry. So what I will do is, instead of the image grid state, we need to call a method called initState. So as you can see that there is an override to the build method, there is also an override to avoid, sorry, I just typed in wrong, void initState. So basically this method is called whenever the object is initialized, its state is initialized. So we also need to call super.initState, and after the super.initState we need to call getImage. So now if we run the application, I hope that it runs basically. So yeah, we can see that initially there's no data, but as the time goes, it loads each and every image, and it just replaces the text view there to show the image. But you can see that all the images are loaded, but there is one problem with this. Yeah, let the images load, and you can see if we go up, you can see the other two images were not there, and you can see that the images are being loaded again. So why does this happen? You can see that basically we're using a grid view.builder here. This is a good way to create grids and lists, by the way. There's also a list view.builder. If you're using Flutter for a long time now, you already know about that. So what a grid view.builder does is, it only builds the item that are being shown on the screen, and it deletes the data of the other items. So we need to find a way to save the images that we have already retrieved, and we also need to save the indexes of the image that we have retrieved. Because if we keep scrolling and we if we keep just scrolling the list and the images keep deleting, and we are calling the get image method again and again to load the images, and this will put a load on the server, and it really decreases the efficiency of the application. So we don't want that to happen. So there's one way to deal with the situation, that is using the block pattern. Okay, right now I do not have any tutorial that will teach you to create a block structure in the Flutter app, so I'll just go with the other way for now. I'll just go to the lib folder and I'll just create a new Dart file. I'll just name this data holder. Yeah. So inside of the data holder, I'll just create a new map. I'll just create a new map that will take that will have the key of integer and a value of uint8 list. Okay, so I hope you see where I'm going with this. I'll just name this image data and just let it be empty. And as you already know, for using the uint8 list, we need to import the typed data package of the Dart. So other than this image data, I also will create a new requested indexes list, because we need to keep the track of indexes for which we have already started the get image function. Okay, so these after creating this too, I'll just import the data holder package inside of the main file. So I'll just call import data holder.dart. So in here, in the get image function, what I will do is I'll check if the requested indexes contains widget _index. If it does not contain the index, then we're gonna go with the procedure, and we will add the index to this list, widget _index. So basically what we're doing here is we're checking the requested indexes list that is being that we just initialized here in the data holder. We're checking this list to see if we have already requested for the image with this index, and if we have not requested, then we're gonna follow with this code here to get the image from the Firebase storage, and then we'll add that index to the requested indexes list. And other than that, what we need to do is we need to check. We also need to do is when we get the image data, we want to add that image data dot put if absent with the key of widget _index, and in place of if absent, I'll just do it this way. I'll just return data. Okay, so what I'm doing here is that when I scroll the list, the previous items get deleted. Okay, so also the image file that we previously retrieved from the server is also deleted. So we want a way so that when we get the data from the server, we want to save that image file in the data holder class also. So we have a map of image data. So what I'm doing here is inside the image data, I'm checking if the item is present, then we don't need to do anything, and if the item is absent, that means the item does not exist in the image data, then we'll just add that image file to that map. Basically, you'll just look at the code and you need to do this on your own. You'll understand what I'm doing here. So this is basically the important step here. And one more thing, that if we're already adding the image to the image data, we need to check in the init state if the image data dot contains key, that is the widget _index. If it does not contain key, only then we need to get the image, or else the image is already present in the image data that is being stored in the holder. Okay, so now when I run the app, and okay, so you can see that the images are being loaded slowly, asynchronously, and we don't. So the problem is here. If the image data does not contain the image, we need to put, as you can see that the application is not yet working. There's also no data when we scroll the image. So what we are missing is if the image data contains the key, does not contain the key, then we get the image. And if it already contains the key, then we want to do is we want to set this dot set state image file is equal to image data dot image data will get the index widget dot underscore index. And now basically when we run the app, I'll just kill the app for now, and when I run the app again, yeah, so as you can see the app is loaded, and let's wait for the app to load all the images. And right now even you can see that we can scroll throughout the images and we see that no images being loaded again. These two images are quite heavy. Basically these are 4 MB and 3 MB here, so this is the internet speed issue, but eventually these images will also get loaded. So you can see that even when we scroll up, these both images stayed there, and these are not being removed. So basically what we're doing here is we're storing the images and the requested indexes here in the data holder, and we keep track of those. And so we only request the data that has not yet been requested, and so that our application just maintains itself and does not excessively uses the internet, and it's more efficient basically. So yeah, so this is basically the Image Grid app. You can use this code to make your own wallpaper app or anything else that uses this kind of display pattern here. So so for the recap, let's get started from the scratch. What we did was we created an image screen that is a stateless widget because we do not need to maintain the state of the grid itself. So inside of that, inside the container of the scaffold's body, we call the make images grid, which basically builds a grid view of 12 items. We call the grid we add a grid delegate property, which takes in account the number of columns that we want to keep inside our grid. So we do that, and then we call and then in the item builder we build an image grid item. So the image grid item is another stateful widget because we want to maintain the state if the image is loaded or not. So we pass in the index of the grid, and according to that index we call the image. So one thing more I just changed here is that when I pass the index to the image grid item, I call that index +1, basically because we start the item count from 0 and we do not have an image that calls image underscore 0. So we want to call image underscore 1 for the 0th index. Okay, for the initial index we want to call image underscore 1. So I just call image +1, index +1 here. So for the index 0 it will call image 1, for 2 it will call 3, and so on. So inside the image grid item we take in the index, and inside of the state we access this index by calling widget underscore index. So we create 2 variables. One is for the storage reference and one is for the image file. And then we get the image using this getImage method, in which we're checking if the index is requested. If the index is already requested, then we do not run this code. We just run this code only when the index is not requested, so that we do not keep in loop with the calling the photos reference and getting the image again and again. So yeah. So inside the decide grid tile method, what we do is we check for the image file. If the image file is empty, we show no text, no data. We show the text of no data, or else we show the image if the image file is there. And to get the image, we call the getImage method. If the image is not yet loaded in the image data, which is in the data holder, we call the get image method, or else we just take the image from the image data and display it in the grid. So this is a quite complex code that you do not get in the first run maybe, but you watch this tutorial once or twice and you'll get the hang of what I'm doing here, because even for the first time I wasn't able to completely catch on what I was completely doing. I was just coding and looking at the things that can that I can improve in the tutorial. And I'm just using data holder for the tutorial purposes. Using a block pattern is more complex way of achieving this, but I thought of data holder to be a better way to do this, because we do not want to get into the complexity of a block pattern. I'll just come with the block tutorial in the near future, but for now I'll just stick with this basic method of storing the data. So this data will not persist after the application is closed, so don't expect that to happen. We are not using shared preferences or any caching here. We're just creating objects in another class that just stores the data throughout the application lifecycle. So I know this tutorial is quite complex for its type. Okay, so let's end the tutorial here. If you like the tutorial and you get to learn anything, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. It helps a lot, and thank you very much for your support. See you next time.